Well, Marcia Kavanaugh, thanks so much for joining us. With the conclusion of the recent elections, there is supposed to be a new wave of reform in the criminal justice system in Orleans Parish. We await the judgment of the future to learn if this talk is practical, naive, or just another political angle. Elsewhere, we will examine the latest COVID numbers and the anticipated restrictions that did not happen. A media investigation looked at how long church authorities knew about the activities of a suspected pedophile deacon. We'll look at these stories, plus the latest in the crime spike in New Orleans, as well as a possible new look for Tulane Avenue. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, LeBron Joseph, anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV, Channel 26, Ramon Antonio Vargas, reporter, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate, and Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4. Let's go on over to LeBron first and get our update on COVID. How are we looking with our numbers and restrictions?
Well, the governor had a pretty stern warning this week that the statewide percentage positivity is over 7%, and that's a number that has crept up in the past couple of weeks, and, a pretty stern warning for folks to do the precautions. Yes, we have a vaccine now that's starting to get to some of our healthcare workers, but we are trending in the wrong direction, is what he said. On a positive side, Mayor Cantrell and Dr. Jennifer Vegno, the city's health director, opted to not make any changes to the modified phase 2.5 that we're in right now. I think it's 25% capacity indoors and 25% outdoors, 75 and 150 people outdoors. But, in the region, while Orleans is still at 4.7, still got some pretty big numbers. Jefferson, I think, over 10% now. St. Tammany approaching that number as well, the percentage positivity. Statewide, several thousand people hospitalized, as well as over 100 folks on ventilators. So no time to let up our guard, even though there are bright spots.
Really, and no time to let up our guard is quite right. You rattled off the numbers of how many people you can let in, how many people, it's just so hard to keep up with this now. How do you manage to do that?
It's 25% or up to 75 indoors and 150 outdoors. And I don't know. Personally, I don't want to be around 150 people, but, that's just me these days. I don't know if I want to be around 75. But, for business owners, it was at least some good news because everyone's struggling. And certainly our bars and restaurants and all are struggling. And, when you do get a chance to get out and support some of these folks to try to help them out a bit, and it would have been a shame, here at the end of the year after we've worked so hard for so many months and, COVID fatigue is set in and everything else, that these people would have to back down their numbers even though they're struggling.
Right. In this week, of course, we saw the first of the vaccines roll out and the first inoculations happen. Yeah,
the first of the vaccines rolled in, first inoculations, and just about every hospital in New Orleans has certainly gotten their allocation. And the issue is that all of those, I know certainly with Oxnard and UMC and those places, veterans, the VA sent out an email earlier saying that all of their employees would be inoculated. That's really good news for healthcare workers. I would imagine the next tier, as we're working through this, would be those most vulnerable seniors and folks that are in senior living centers, where we continue to have a lot of infection, and that's where we're losing a bigger percentage of our population.
LeBron, this whole vaccination stage so far seems amazingly well organized. I was sort of dreading. I was thinking, gee, when that happens, when the vaccinations come, that's going to be a big mess, and you have all kind of people screaming and everything, but it seems to be going smoothly.
Yeah, Errol, it appears as if everyone sort of did their homework and everyone sort of had it paced out, and we knew it was coming. We didn't know when, and when we started to hear that, hey, vaccines here, apparently along with the feds, man, these folks got it all together, and it is working in that way. And even in the hospitals, it's not like everyone that works at a hospital is getting inoculated. Unlike the VA, places like Oxnard that has thousands of employees, they even have a tier in terms of who would get vaccines first. It would be people that are coming in contact with COVID patients. It would be nurses. It would be even people that clean up in those wards as well. So it is pretty well organized. I'm happy about that. And by the way, there is another vaccine trial that's happening in New Orleans right now, and that is the Johnson & Johnson trial happening over at Tulane. Oxford was a part of the very first one there, and so now it appears as if we'll be a part of another trial, and hopefully that gets to market pretty soon as well.
So when we're getting the vaccines in, and of course, the concern has also been the number of doses and enough to vaccinate everybody who wants to get vaccinated. That's an issue, too, that the state is concerned about, is there are those who just say, I'm not so sure.
Yep, and even in Orleans, there are campaigns running. I know the city is running a campaign, a media buy that they've made in the past week or so, encouraging people to get vaccinated. Certainly, if you've got the complications that would prevent you any big allergies, or pregnant women or children where the vaccine hasn't been tested as thoroughly, you're encouraged not to take the vaccine, but everyone else. And they're putting some money behind being able to get that message out as well, and getting some pretty high-profile names also to get this done on camera, on video. I know the vice president got his done just yesterday as well.
But meanwhile, the numbers aren't really where we want to see them. Like you said, going in the wrong direction.
Yep, are still going in the wrong direction. I think we're almost at about 7,000 deaths now. We've been sort of hovering around the 6,100, 6,200. We're at 7,000 deaths
in the state.
In the state, statewide. That's right, and about 280,000 cases altogether, and registering about 3,000 cases a day, which is still not very good at all. And that's part of the reason that the governor was so adamant about, hey guys, we're in a dangerous place. Christmas is coming, and please tamper down with the Christmas celebrations and New Year's and all that.
And wear your mask, wash your hands, socially distance. Okay.
Yes. And the message remains the same.
All right, LeBron, thanks a lot. Mike, over to you. We've seen in Orleans Parish criminal justice system an effort for reform. It really started several years ago, but we really did see it sort of turn a corner with these past elections.
Well, we sure did, and elections are a snapshot in time, but it does not always show you the very gradual forces at work, and certainly that has been the case in Orleans Parish, going all the way back really to post-Katrina, when there were some reforms that actually brought in some outside reform groups like the Vera Institute, for example. It started with things like reforming the bail system. You often see end cash bail. People should not, be held awaiting trial, innocent until proven guilty, just because they can't afford their bail to get out. But that was just one component of a real larger progressive movement that we have actually seen nationally. Some very progressive, reform-minded district attorneys elected in other major cities, campaigning on issues all the way from vowing not to prosecute marijuana possession cases, to not try juveniles as adults, to end cash bail bonds. And while we didn't overtly see that in New Orleans, that's been going on for several years. And it also, showed up in a big way in the district attorney's race, where that, margin, 58% for Jason Williams, 42% for Kiva Landrum, surprised a lot of people. Not necessarily that Jason won, but the margin was replicated down ballot in other races that maybe did not get quite as much attention. I'll, point to some of the more obscure races in juvenile court, where you had former prosecutors like Nikki Roberts, got a lot of endorsements, very well liked. She lost by almost that identical margin, sort of a 60-40 margin, to Renard Derensburg, who had been the judicial administrator of juvenile court. Similarly, a guy named Kevin Guillory, a longtime prosecutor, he lost to Clint Smith in juvenile court by almost the same margin. So it really showed that the progressive movement wasn't just concentrated on the district attorney's race. There was a flip the bench movement for some of the criminal court judge seats. Franz Ziblich, who by all measures was a very efficient, judge, and he won in what surprised a lot of people. Once again, by that 60-40 margin to a virtual unknown, Angel Harris.
He lost.
So
yeah.
Do not underestimate the cumulative effect of constant headlines of things like, wrongful convictions, these exonerations led by the Innocence Project of New Orleans, for example. Some of those very IPNO exonerees, they are volunteers, staff, along with the whole range of folks from the public defender's office, were the ground troops in many of these campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
They had the energy. They certainly had, the platform far more than some of the candidates who came from, the district attorney or prosecutor
right.
side.
Well, let me ask you this, Mike. I mean, with all of these, the reformers now within the system, what should we expect to see happen?
Well, it kind of starts with the district attorney's office, and Jason Williams has, laid out a bit of a platform. The first thing that we will see are the appointments that he makes to be his top staff, starting with chief of trials. He has indicated that he's going to, have not just one, but several top assistants to look at not just how they run trials, but things like racial inequities and other issues that he campaigned on. So I would look for the very things that he promised during the campaign should be able to take effect almost immediately. Those juvenile cases brought over to adult court, they're relatively small in number. They can range from a dozen to a couple dozen per year. Jason Williams has vowed not to take those transfers to adult court, and you'll see that right away. Juveniles will be tried as juveniles. The non-prosecution of drug possession cases, yet to be seen just how far he'll take that. He's vowed, not to prosecute marijuana cases. It's already, almost completely decriminalized just on, minor possession cases. But he also, campaigned on the fact that, with other forms of illegal drugs, cocaine, that you have to treat users in possession cases much differently than you would dealers on distribution cases. Those are decisions that rest solely in the discretion of the district attorney. And literally, the second he takes office and starts getting cases and screening them, we should see those reforms take effect.
Okay.
Now, other issues such as reforming bail are more complicated. Clearly people who are arrested, the law already sets out 10 factors to be considered by a magistrate judge in setting bail. To just eliminate all cash bail is a taller order. I think it's more of a goal and aspiration than it is policy.
And that would be for the minor offenses. We're not talking about serious violent offenses.
Well, right. And, but, when you talk about end cash bail, I mean, there is a philosophy to go with the federal system, which is if you are dangerous, deemed dangerous and danger to the community, then you are detained. There's no consideration of, you can pay money to get out. And that everybody else, perhaps by virtue of, being arrested in a nonviolent crime, having, no criminal track record and roots in the community, could very well have a system of whole, some kind of home incarceration as a condition of bail with electronic monitoring and those kinds of alternatives.
Right. So this is something that we'll have to see how this all plays out. But there are definitely some changes over there within the criminal justice system.
Well, right. And, we've all heard, reform candidates take offices. This is something that we should see immediately. It'll be fast reform that will definitely hit the ground running as soon as Jason Williams takes office.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. We're going to move on over to Ramon right now. And Ramon, you and your partner in this reporting, David Hammer, over at Channel 4, you've done a series, 3-part series on Deacon George Brignac. And what did you find?
Yes, I think the broadly, obviously, Deacon George Brignac was a man who we knew had been accused of molesting sexually molesting at least 6 children over 4 different cases. But then after his death, we submitted a public records request for the most recent criminal case against him, and learned that the number was actually 4 times that that authorities suspected that he had molested. You're talking about roughly 26, if not 27, boys whom he had accused, and they were boys born from the 1950s to the 1980s to kind of really show, I think, that this was a number of generations that were impacted by his behavior, and there were several places of several, I guess, opportunities to intervene, that church bureaucrats at really all levels just failed to take advantage of,
and so that
and it allowed him to.
It begs the question, how did this happen? How was he allowed to stay in there and interacting with young people?
I mean, the brief answer is that he, after 3 arrests in connection with 5 different victims, he was removed from the ministry in 1988. 10 years later, he is able to latch on to in a volunteer position with the Knights of Columbus, based out of St. Mary Magdalene Church. We had a statement from the Knights of Columbus that said that they don't subject their their prospective members to background checks, because they're not an organization primarily focused on youth services. So that brings him into, he's kind of back on the Catholic scene. It's mostly a community service club that he's with, and then come in 2009, the pastor of St. Mary Magdalene, which hosted the chapter of Knights of Columbus that George Brignac belonged to, invites him to begin reading at masses. And I mean, George Brignac did not hide his past. He took a what's called safe environment training, which is a program that trains archdiocesan personnel to report to prevent child molestation, and failing that, to report it. He disclosed his background, his history of allegations of child abuse. He was allowed to complete the course. He begins reading at mass, and then of course approaches an altar boy in a wheelchair and begins chatting him up. Begins inviting him to spend the night at his house, asking the mother of the altar boy to let the altar boy spend the night at Brignac's house. And I think, in retrospect, knowing everything that we know now, those are the types of overtures that we just can't regard innocently.
Now, he did pass away this year, but he had been arrested.
Yes.
Was it on a rape charge, and he was awaiting trial for that? Is that correct?
Yes, he was arrested in September 2019 in connection with a rape charge pressed by a man who had accused him of raping him in the early 1980s, and had collected a $550,000 settlement. In the summer of 2018, he speaks publicly about that settlement, which brings forth just a phalanx of accusers, which they then use to kind of buttress a criminal case. That same story kind of sparked the police took note of it, speak to him, and then of course rape is a crime that in Louisiana has no statute of limitations, and therefore that's why they were able to kind of bring charges for an act that was 4 decades ago.
Well, let me just say that there's a lot to these 3 pieces that we just can't cover right now. We just don't have the time for it. But in The Advocate, Times-Picayune, New Orleans Advocate, and of course on Channel 4, David Hammer, you all got just so much information when you made the public records request from the DA's office, right, on this case.
Yes, it was tens of more than 10,000 pages, and obviously they constituted a few thousand documents, and we were able to page through them and then turn around a story that started publishing on NOLA.com on Wednesday, and the last piece posted today, and the last piece will be published in print tomorrow.
Okay, all righty. Thanks a lot, Ramon, and to David for your reporting. Okay, Errol, over to you. Tulane Avenue, going to get a little bit of a facelift.
First of all, speaking of downtown thoroughfares, late breaking news here that Canal Street, the part across from the Hard Rock that's been blocked all these years, that tonight they're opening it again.
All right.
So once again,
that's
we'll
good
be able to
news.
drive straight up and down Canal Street. And so that's a relief right there. What's happening on Tulane and Carrollton, that site, we would know it as having a building called the Fountain Bay. Used to be a hotel. Used to be a lot of the things. A long time ago, it was an amusement park. For a long time, it was a baseball park from 1915 to 1957, the old New Orleans Pelicans.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, it was there because baseball was being played in New Orleans in the summer when it rained a lot, that the rain check was invented. It was first used, became part of the English language, and also Ladies' Day, that they were both created by the Pelicans at that site. Anyway, developer Sidney Torres wants to do something about the site, which needs something desperately. What happened is after they closed the ballpark, they built this sort of like resort hotel, really nice place called the Fontainebleau Motor Hotel. It was really supposed to be the anchor of Tulane Avenue. And at the time, the main way to getting into New Orleans was coming down Airline Highway. And so as you crossed into New Orleans, there would be this. It was supposed to be really glamorous. Part of it was going to be called the $1 Million Mile. Well, at the time, I guess $1 million seemed like a lot of money, and for a while it was very glamorous. They had a tiki restaurant, and people would go there. But once I-10 developed, and once people started taking the expressway around, it was just like Tulane Avenue, and Tulane Avenue started to degrade. The part across the street from that facility is really just a bad area. There's been a lot of crime, a lot of murder, a lot of rapes over the year. And so just cleaning that up. Fortunately, Sidney Torres, who's a developer, his office is right around there. So he sees what's going on. So he's bought that property, and he wants to, there's an empty Burger King. He's going to make that into a chicken place. But the old hotel part, he wants to modify and make an apartments, wants to put up lights and palm trees and really make the area nice again. And if that happens, if he could, put money in it, there's two good things happening along Tulane Avenue. There's that end, but on the other end, where you have the University Hospital, and you can already see the impact of the University Hospital.
And the VA hospital, too.
Well, that combination, you're seeing the impact of that by bits and pieces with some of the old buildings, some of the old motels that are being converted into what appears to be a lot nicer apartment buildings. So there may be a gradual resurfacing. We may achieve the $1 billion mile at some point, but it was really stagnant for a while. But this is really a welcome addition to New Orleans, and at what could be a very vital intersection too. And not far away is the site of the old Charity Hospital, and there's plans about trying to redevelop that. Probably be a multi-purpose facility that could have a lot of jobs and people living in there. So if all of that was part of a whole new complex along the way, that would really be nice.
It certainly would be. And also, Torres says he wants to try to get businesses around there to come up with, a business alliance, a business group to just really try to improve even more than the property that he.
And if you drive along Tulane by bits and pieces, you can see what's happening.
Right.
And so there are signs of progress.
All righty. Thanks a lot, Errol. Mike, over to you. But one thing that is worrisome is the crime rate in Orleans Parish. Mike.
Yes, and that's the news nobody wants to hear. We're going to end this year at close to 200 homicides, but that's clearly not the only indicator. Non-fatal shootings, similar to homicides, are looking to be up about 60% over 2019. And one of the more alarming statistics are carjackings, up 120% so far over last year. Now, this is happening during a COVID pandemic. Part of the year was shut down. So both the police department and, criminologists looking at this are trying to, tease out the factors. There's always, so many factors that go into crime trends. But clearly, the fact that a lot of people are under financial stress, especially on the margins, service industry, those kind of jobs being eliminated, have made, people who are already struggling perhaps a little more desperate. Another continuation of a trend that we had seen for some time are the number of juveniles involved in the violent crimes such as armed robberies and carjackings. Right. When I say a continuation of the trend, it's a troubling escalation because there previously had been a rash of, car burglaries, break-ins, oftentimes 20 or more cars in the same spot all windows smashed and belongings taken. Well, one of the theories police are working under is that, some of those juveniles have graduated to picking up a gun and escalating the crime into robberies and carjackings.
So real quick,
one other factor.
What's NOP doing? Isn't NOP? What are they doing about it? Didn't they just announce something?
Yes, and I got to tell you that first of all, the department is down in numbers. There was a net loss of officers over the course of the year. That doesn't help. The fact that the city budget is in dire straits, forcing furloughs for officers one day every 2 weeks is decreasing the numbers even more. And because of constitutional policing concerns, they got rid of all the district task forces. Those were those proactive cops, neighborhood to neighborhood, who could flood a zone that was seeing a spike in crime. It has been replaced by a federal partnership with NOPD called VCATE, which is a violent crime abatement and investigative team. But they deal a little more with gathering intelligence and medium and long-term investigations. Clearly, that's not addressing the immediate crime problems, neighborhood to neighborhood, the way the task forces work. Once again, I think by the end of the year, the numbers are not going to look good. The police department is getting more proactive in getting the message out that, we're here, we're fighting, we're using different crime fighting strategies, and urging the public, as always, see something, say something.
Be vigilant.
Please help.
Okay.
The public needs, to help the police department solve these crimes.
Right. Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. And now, quickly, guys, Roundtable E.
On the 4500 block of Canal Street, there's a house that was known as the Centennial House that used to be really famous for its Christmas decorations, and then that stopped for many years. Well, it's back. The new owners have it really beautifully decorated. So go drive down Canal Street, 4500 block in Mid-City, and then go up and drive past the Hard Rock where you won't be blocked.
Okay, and go up Canal. Thanks a lot. 10 seconds each, guys. LeBron.
City announced, they responded to our request for no fireworks, no in-person viewing, and the ball will drop for about 30 seconds for TV. Best seat in the house is at your house.
Okay. Ramon, real quick.
We'll have a conversation with outgoing District Attorney Leon Canizero about why George Brignac is the only clergyman whom the Orleans DA's office has charged in connection with the clerical abuse list released in November 2018.
All right, we'll be looking for that. Mike, real quick.
Yeah, 5 days from now, Pelicans season opener. We got the Zion Williamson show hitting the court. No limit restrictions. So I know everyone's kind of focused on the Saints drama, but here come the Pelicans.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for joining us here, and thank you all for joining us, too. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
All right.